Hey everyone, sorry for the late upload of this office hours. Unfortunately, I didn't manage to record the first few minutes of the last office hours. That's something I'm hoping to improve upon next time. Just a little bit of business before I get into the part I did record, which is firstly a big thank you to Worldofpeace, Nix Package's contributor, who's been helping put together and organize these office hours. My original intention was to have them be a co-host and help organize and put them together more visibly, but that didn't work out at first. We're going to start having them be more present and be present in future office hours. Our next office hours is August 16th. I'm recording this on August 15th, so that's tomorrow at 3 p.m. American New York time, which is also 1900 UTC. So a little bit more business. These office hours are now covered by the contributor covenant code of conduct. I've been putting together a document with Worldofpeace which describes some information about these office hours and how they're run, and that code of conduct will be linked in that document. For question asking during the stream, we're asking people to use the Zoom hand feature, and then we'll have somebody call on you so you can ask your question. There's also an IRC channel on Freenode called #NixOS-office hours, office hours being one word, where if you ask a question, somebody will be able to ask it on the stream. Today being the stream you're about to see, we're joined by Samuel, who's known as Disassembler on IRC and GitHub, and John. They're both from IOHK, and they've been doing a lot of work on NixOps. We also have Amine, who's the NixOps maintainer, who will and together we'll all be discussing pull request to NixOps number 1179, where most of the code is actually deleted and moved out into another set of repositories. The goal here is to make it easier to maintain NixOps, let more people maintain little subsets of NixOps while keeping the core simpler and easier to keep up to date and keep higher quality. Anyway, I will see you all on August the 16th at 3 p.m. New York time, and thank you so much. See you soon.
Packet.net has an SOS console command, which comes in useful to connect to the consoles when you're spinning up a machine. And so we were able to integrate that into the command line and issue that. We did similar. We migrated another repo over as well, or Sam had. And also we did the same with Hetzner, although we hadn't tested it. So really, we just tested a little more what had already been started and developed it a little bit further, cleaned it up a bit. And it's looking pretty functional as of right now. We did modify in terms of the release.nix code. That was modified and revamped a little bit so we could have the structure to just issue the build command with which plugins you want to pull in. And that does give you the option of pulling in plugins that are either sitting in a backend repo somewhere. They could be your own repo that it's not necessarily already specified in the repo file that would come with this core plugin, NixOps plugin file already. You can also do a call package for a local plugin if you're doing development. So there's a few different ways that you can use that. And the commands for different plugins, we can make them extensible as we need to pull in other commands for backends. So that's kind of where it's at. It still needs more work. I believe since the PR went up, Amine has done some work, and also another community member, to bring a number of other backends over. And as of right now, I think two of the things that are lacking in terms of being migrated over to the plugin architecture yet is the test library and then also the documentation. So that's kind of where things stand at the moment with it.
That sounds great. Can you tell us a little bit of your motivation to start this plugin and implement this plugin architecture?
Sure. Sam, why don't you say a few words about that?
Yeah, so the primary motivation we had was we were constantly we were working on a Packet.net plugin that we were using, and we were basically forking our own NixOps to do it, and then we were having to constantly rebase things into master and deal with merge conflicts and things that changed. And when I talked with Graham about his plugin that he had created in the repo to basically remove everything and make it a separate plugin, I was like, wow, this would be great. I also ran into similar issues. One of my first contributions to Nix was a NixOps pull request to add Vultr support. And that one's still open and has not been resolved, but I have a plugin in my repo now that's using that uses Vultr that I can use on my local systems and whatnot for deploying my own personal stuff and whatnot. So one of the biggest benefits to doing things like this is it empowers people to basically create their own plugins and not have to touch core if they don't need to touch core. And then if we need to add features into core, we can, but we can decide as a community what's something that should be across all plugins that should be in the core NixOps architecture versus what are functions that should be specific to a plugin. And we did add the ability to add features specific to a plugin as well. Like we have an SOS console for our packet for our packet plugin that you can basically just say NixOps packet SOS console, and it gets you into the system even if you completely screwed up the SSH networking and everything.
That sounds really great. That sounds really cool. That's something I've wanted myself for a long time is being able to make little patches to NixOps, but not have to actually fork the whole thing. I see Zimbatum has his hand raised. Would you like to ask a question?
Yeah, so it looks amazing, and I think it's definitely the right direction to take NixOps. And so I think I'm curious a little bit about, what do you need from the community, and how do you see this going forward? Or do you need anything from us, or is there anything that can be done to help you move forward?
Yeah, I think one of the primary things we need is a decision that this is the way we want to go, and B, creating the repos for the plugins that NixOps is going to officially support in the NixOS org, and giving John and Amine and anyone else that needs push access to that to basically get those initial plugins created. And then once we have those initial plugins created, we can update our pull request to point to the NixOS repositories instead of our local ones and get something in core.
That sounds really cool. So this part of the reason we put this together and got you here is also because we could get Amine here. And since Amine is the de facto maintainer of NixOps, be interesting to hear from him. In particular, it's a bit famously hard to get a pull request merged into NixOps. So I wonder what he thinks about this pull request and how it might change merges in the future.
Yeah, thank you. So first, thank you, Samuel, Johnny, and Graham for the work. It's really great and exciting to have that. And I really think it's gonna be, it's gonna make it easier to maintain NixOps, since we're focused on a couple of plugins which are officially maintained in the core NixOps, and you can have community members spinning up their own plugins and working with those without having a bottleneck on the core repo. So I think it's really the way to go. And to go forward, I'm not sure what should be our priorities. From what I can think of, make sure that we can have documentation and the manual. The question is, what should be included in the core manual? Should we have the official backends still in the manual? How do we, do release notes, etc.? Another important thing is running the functional tests. So I think even if we can just run the tests and specify a file from another repo to make sure that, for example, the packet plugin, we can run the functional tests easily, that should be enough, in my opinion. So that's sort of the summary.
Do you think it would make sense to create a new NixOps organization on GitHub for kind of putting all the plugins together, maybe?
Yeah, I'm not sure if that's required. I know that Terraform did that for their providers, but I don't see that there is a problem with having the backends in the main NixOS organization, and having a couple also in Nix community organization, so we can have both. I'm not against having a different one, but I'm not sure if that's needed really.
So you mentioned some concerns about running the functional tests in the documentation. Do you think that, so right now the documentation includes all the different providers that we have bundled in. Do you think that you would want to preserve that behavior, or maybe have a way to link to like an index of these modules and how to view their documentation?
Yeah, I think it might be easier just maybe even initially to have just the documentation for the core NixOps, and then maybe links to the different backends, whether it's official or even community backends in the manual. And then you can click on that, and whoever is maintaining the backend is going to make sure to have a link to some documentation, whether it's DocBook or anything else. I don't know.
Cool. Yeah. DocBook is a big question.
Yeah, I had a question about that. I was thinking, I don't know how much work it would be because I haven't actually kind of dug into the code to see how difficult it might be, but what if each of the plugins still have their own documentation as a part of the backend repo, but we put a hook in particular for the documentation so that when the person goes to build their NixOps and they choose whatever plugins they want, each plugin then passes a documentation blob to the core build, and that gets basically compiled in when the document gets assembled. So that if you build it with 3 plugins, then you get the documentation for all 3 plugins in there. You get the documentation for whatever plugins you build it with.
That sounds like a pretty good idea. I like that a lot. So I wonder if it would be possible to see a demo of the new code, or just like a little bit of an idea of how to put together these different plugins.
So unfortunately, unless someone else can do that right now, I can't do it. My primary computer that I have everything set up on Zoom did not want to install, and I came in. I'm at an office today. I came in just a few minutes right before and didn't have time to troubleshoot what was going on with Zoom. So I'm on a secondary computer now with nothing set up.
No worries. Sam, are you able to do that? Maybe not. No worries. All right. Well, I think that's really exciting. So what concretely is the exact next step that we need to do, and how can we get this merged in? I mean.
Yeah, I'm open for opinions, to be honest. But I think it's really a matter of deciding how to manage the manual and running the functional tests, because that's what we need for to create the next release, for example. If we can run the functional tests for all the backends, I would expect that we're going to remove the files for example, AWS functional tests and GCE and whatnot in the core repo now. So then it's just a matter of finding a solution to run those from the different repos. Might be just trivial. I haven't checked yet. Yeah, and I guess the manual, because that's important also. Yeah.
I guess if it's stable enough, maybe it can be merged into master and released as unstable.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, we can actually do that, yeah.
And like make a 2.0 or 3.0. I don't know where we're at in the numbering.
Yeah, I think we are at 1.7. But also, should we have like the repos already under the NixOS organization at this point, or before the merge, or that could wait also?
You have to decide.
Yeah, I think what we were really hoping to do was to get that moved over and put it under the NixOS control, at least for the core repos that it's going to support, and then we can update that in the PR before we merge it in, so it's pointing to NixOS.
Yeah, I would prefer that, to be honest. And also, I think the AWS repo didn't move the history yet, so this probably also needed.
It looks like Sam has found a way to share his screen here. I don't seem to have audio from you though, Sam.
I might need to restart here because it's getting really, really choppy here.
So I have your audio now. I wonder if it's just because you're doing a lot of builds at the moment that it's choppy.
Is that any better?
Definitely still a bit choppy. That's all right. Okay. Oh boy. Well, I suppose I'll give him.
Is that better?
Say again?
Any better?
It's a bit less choppy. It still has a little bit of chop to it though. Let's see how it goes.
Okay. So this is the NixOps plugin core that's in the pull request there. And essentially, I have a Vultr plugin set up in mind, so I can do /devshell argp and then specify that for P I want to have the Vultr plugin. You could replace this with a path just somewhere on your system or whatnot in here as well. But I just have it in the main NixOps core plugin repo right now. So this brings it up here, and then I can basically use this just like a normal NixOps deploy there. Can you guys still hear me?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay. And then there's the deploy, and it's starting to build stuff. The Vultr one doesn't have any extra stuff like the packet.net one, but I can do NixOps. Actually, let me do p.packet in here too. I don't have a packet instance set up, but I can at least show you the help text here for how it works. NixOps. So, actually, is this the latest? Let me do a poll. Try again. There we go. You'll see that you can add your own commands to the interface in here. Like, so we have an SOS console that'll get you in there, and any plugin can basically add this without having to modify core to do so. There's also list plugins, which will list what plugins are currently installed. In this case, I have Packet and Vultr installed.
This is really cool. So does this change in this pluginization? Does it allow changing core behavior of NixOps, or just adding like resource types and that type of thing?
John, you'll have to take that one.
Yeah, so you can add resource types, but basically everything that's coming in from a plugin is through well-defined hooks. So there's 3 hooks in there right now. One's for the CLI, one's for resources, and it's been a few weeks since I looked at the source code, so I don't immediately recall the other one. But essentially, it's well-defined interfaces for those hooks. So to the extent that those hooks you can pass functionality or resources through, that's what you can do. But beyond that, you won't be able to do anything else to core unless we do updates to core itself, and for instance, add more plugin hooks or modify the core code itself.
Sure. Well, this sounds like a big start already. And so this is part of work that you've been doing for IOHK, is that right?
That's correct. Yes.
Has IOHK considered or looked at tools other than NixOps, like the ones that use that are stateless or something along the lines? Why did you choose NixOps?
So, Sam, you have a little more history. Do you want to speak to that?
So we were using NixOps when I first got here, and we're very big in the Nix community and everything we like to do. We like to benefit the Nix community, so we figured rather than use something like Terraform or other tools to deploy, we'd use the tools that Nix provides, and that's why we use NixOps. There may be some other tools out there that might better suit things, but we prefer to use the Nix-based tools where we can.
Sounds good. I'm glad for it, because the work you've done on Nix packages and NixOps have been really, really excellent. So thank you for being able to upstream those contributions from IOHK. Great. Does anybody have questions about this NixOps pull request or anything else around the NixOps project, since we have Amine here?
So I'm thinking probably maybe not immediately, depending on the level of challenge and how much resource time we have to work at it. But at some point, it would probably be good for the test library to similarly, each backend repo or plugin would package its own or include its own tests, unit tests, etc. And then through another testing hook, core would be able to pull those in and then execute based on which plugins are being built.
I think that would be perfect, yeah.
Yeah, that sounds like a great plan. Yep, Aryan?
So will the core plugins stay in the NixOps repository, like the cores, the ones that we support officially, or will they also move out? Can you hear me? By the way?
I can hear you.
Oh, okay, good.
Yeah. So I think that's what we're somewhat discussing right now, right? Like, so it sounds to me like we'd like to move at least the AWS and Hetzner under NixOS control. The other ones, I'm not sure. That's probably up for discussion.
I mean,
and there would definitely be a separate repository. There's no, other than the only one that's in the NixOps repository is the none type backend.
I think so. One of the problems that we've faced is the, for example, for the Vultr or the DigitalOcean backends, getting changes and improvements merged for those can be very challenging, because the people who have commit rights to NixOps maybe don't have the knowledge or experience with DigitalOcean to know if it's a good thing. So I think we would want to move those providers into a separate repository where we can be pretty forgiving about who gets access to that. For example, the author of that plugin should totally have the ability to merge pull requests against that plugin. So yes, we would definitely be pulling out all of the providers out of NixOps core, and then where the actual plugins come from is something to discuss now on a per provider basis. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, definitely.
All right, very good. Well, unless there are further questions about NixOps, I've asked if Zimbatim would give a demo of a tool that he released today. Are you up for doing that?
Sure. So I don't have any screen sharing capabilities right now because I'm on Wayland.
If you send me links,
a link and then just talk about it a little bit. And I'm curious about what people think about this project. So I'm just pasting the link. Where is it? So it's not a big thing, I think. It's not huge. It's just like an experiment, but also the start of something. So I posted the thread on Discord as well. Just finding the announce. All right. No, that's not it. So basically, I don't know if you use Nix with your CI, you might have a binary cache. And what you're doing is basically you're invoking Nix build, and then you're pushing and pulling from the binary cache to share the result of your build outputs. So it might be Hydra, but it could be also Travis CI or any type of CI where you have a binary cache plugged in. You might be using CacheX or maybe some other binary cache. And so the reflection was that you often have a situation where you build things with Nix, like you use Docker tool that's build image, and then you end up pushing the same image to another thing, like a Docker registry or something. And so the idea was, what if we could plug a HP service on top of the binary cache and just load and unpack the NAR files on the fly? So right now, the only capability is to expose the files directly. So you can basically, for example, build a static website, put it into your derivation output, and then once you find the star path, you can just give that to someone and you can share a preview of your website. So that's kind of nice for front-end people that want to preview stuff. So it gives you this sort of a review ability of things. And the demo is basically pulling stuff from the binary cache, the shared one. And yeah, that's it. I mean, the path that you use is you basically resolve you find your star path that you have, and you put this after the host name of the service, and you just enter this, and you get the file unpacked on the fly. So that's the idea of it. I don't know if there's any questions.
So is that able to serve binaries as well as like plain text, or can it serve essentially anything that's in a Nix store? Yeah,
it unpacks the NAR file. So just maybe I should talk a bit about how the binary cache works, just because not everyone knows exactly how it works. So you have two things in the binary cache. You have the NAR info files that stores the metadata of your builds. So that contains like a path to the NAR file, and maybe like the signature if you sign the archive, and a few other things like the size of the NAR file and a few other things. And so that's like one thing. And then the NAR files are basically like tarballs, but with our own custom format. And it's basically a list of items in the file with some recursion in it. So you get a sort of tarball of all of your files from your derivation output, right? So you can't access them directly. So the service, what it does is it connects, it finds the NAR info, it finds the NAR file from the NAR info, and then it streams the content of the file, making over HP. It unpacks it on the fly, parses the NAR, and then extracts the file that's in the archive. So it can be like any type of files. So you can basically store files, directories, and symlinks in an NAR file. And files can have an executable attribute, but that's not exposed because there's no notion of executable HP content. I don't know, but yeah, that's the gist of it.
That's really it's really incredible. So I use Nix to build a lot of disk images that are booted over iPXE, which is a way of putting essentially an ISO over HTTP and then just booting your server off of it. This is pretty nice because it's really easy to start from a clean slate, but it's pretty annoying because I have to upload these really big disk images to a special place on my web server. Could this serve those iPixie images? Would that be an appropriate use of this? Like if I could point this at my own cache?
Yeah, definitely. It would be perfect for that, I think.
It's really wonderful.
The only thing that's missing though is a way to create a stable name, like a mutable name. Like if you have a release, you might want to name the release. Whereas right now you have to remember the star path, the complete path. So I'm still thinking about how we could do this, because that would be pretty cool. Like I just see that Quailis, I hope I don't mispronounce the name, is talking about we could, link to the manual pages, right, in NixOS. So actually, one of the ideas was, what if you could add a name, like, I don't know, like a channel name, and then every time you do a push of the channel, you would actually get the manual for the channel. And then it means that we can easily, on the NixOS website, have all the manuals instead of just the latest one, right? And you know always which one is which. You could also expose all of the NixOS options and the package names for all of the releases of NixOS.
So if you were to do that, would you need to evaluate Nix packages, or would you find a way to create those relationships differently?
I don't know. That's I need someone to tell me what to do.
Maybe Amine will tell you what to do. What's up, Amine?
Yeah, I had just a question. Is it able to, the service, is it able to follow symlinks? Because one of the issues in Hydra with those built products, which almost does the same thing, I think it just shares out to Nix cat.nar. So
Okay.
I think there is an issue with following symlinks in Hydra. I don't know if this fixed that issue.
All right. So right now it shows that it just returns a text file that gives you the name of the symlink. But I think I could replace this with a HP redirect fairly easily.
Mm-hmm.
And the nice thing is, because everything's hashed, so you know that the content is immutable, and so you can put a permanent redirect.
So would it also be hard to add directory listings to this? Would this be easy or difficult, or just something you haven't come up to yet?
Yeah, so it's not hard, but it means you just need some logic to find the names in the archive. Because right now I'm just streaming until I find the file and then I output it. Then I just need to add a bit more logic to keep streaming and collect the names, and then that should be fairly easy to do. Like, I don't know, 1 hour of hacking and it should be fine.
So does this mean you're not actually unpacking the NARs? You're just looking at them, like, are you just fetching them through HTTP and then like picking through them as you stream through?
Yeah. It's actually, because it's written in Go and it has a quite nice streaming capabilities. So it's all, I'm just plugging things together and I'm saying, okay, unpack it. While you unpack it, also read the NAR file. And then I have an iterator on the NAR file and I just iterate until I find the finding.
That's really clever. I really like that a lot. Nicely done. So it might be interesting to find out how to deploy something like this on nixos.org, which would be maybe the next step towards figuring out how to serve the manuals in the same way.
Yeah, I think as soon as we have a sort of naming thing where we can publish channels, or I don't know, I like to think them as sort of GC routes as well. Then yeah, we can. I think that's the next thing, and then once that's ready, I think it would be worth having it deployed to the NixOS organization.
The other thing about the way your URLs are structured right now is they are essentially eternally cacheable, right?
Yeah.
So the GC routes I wonder, have you thought about if you would redirect over to the permanent URL, or if you would just serve it under this alias URL, or?
Yeah, I don't know. I think it depends on the use case, because the problem is with a redirect, if you refresh the page, you're not gonna get the updates. So like if you want to use it for a static website, you could imagine, to have the host name to be like a name, and then you resolve if it matches the host name, then you load the content from somewhere. But I don't know if for your personal website, would you want it to be redirected to the store cache? I don't know.
No, I suppose probably not.
I mean, it would be original, at least. That's for sure.
Well, very cool. Well, thank you for sharing that. So we have, let's see, this meeting is scheduled for 45 minutes long. So that gives us only just a few minutes left. Does anybody have something they'd like to talk about or bring up, or a pull request we could look at together? Yeah, Sam?
So I was wondering, I had raised a pull request on Hydra a week or two ago or so about a approach to use RabbitMQ as a queuing system. I got some feedback from Jelko that he thought it would be better in PostgreSQL rather than in RabbitMQ, but I was just wondering if anyone had any thoughts on that. That was something that we were looking at doing probably in the upcoming month or so, on trying to improve our Hydras so we can get notifications properly.
Right. Does anybody have opinions on Hydra and RabbitMQ? Okay, I can start. So it's this difficult balance. So I was actually talking to Ilko about that just last week, and it's a bit of a difficult balance of making it very scalable, especially for something the size of Nix packages, which would benefit from this, something like RabbitMQ, but also smaller users who maybe build 10 things in their Hydra, and so then having to install and maintain RabbitMQ would be a bit onerous for that case. One thing that we were talking about is the possibility of making it a bit pluggable, where out of the box it would use Postgres notifications. Do you think that would be a feasible way to go about it?
I think it might be. It's going to require some digging into how easy it's going to be to make it pluggable and what the interface would look like for interfacing with the different queuing systems and whatnot. But I think that might be, and then you can just have more features with RabbitMQ than you have with the Postgres backend for it.
Right, right. Okay. So on IRC, a couple of people asked if there are small users of Hydra, and there are actually small users of Hydra. One of my favorites is a quantum physics lab that uses Hydra to deploy to their devices. And a second question was if Postgres is harder or easier to maintain than Rabbit. And that's a bit of a non sequitur because Postgres is already required to run Hydra. There might be a compatibility later for MySQL, but we might as well just drop that probably.
So should we go ahead and looking into how to add a queuing layer into it that's pluggable? Would that be a good approach for us to start looking into?
So Ilko actually is doing a bit of a Hydra hack day today.
Oh, really?
Or he was doing it in Zurich time. So I'm not sure where he is on that. We should you and him should definitely talk. And it's a bit unfortunate that he was in Zurich this week because he would have been here today in office hours. So it would have been nice.
Let's see if we can get him for office hours next week then.
Yep, 2 weeks from now, I think.
Or 2 weeks from now.
But I think he's available to come 2 weeks from now. But yeah, so maybe I will send him a message and see if he made any progress to update that ticket. And if he hasn't, then I'll say something. And yeah, definitely do some research into using Postgres for events like that.
Okay.
All right, sound good?
Yep.
Cool. I love that idea. I've seen the number of pending notifications on NixOS.org's Hydra. Just I'm not sure we'll ever hit 0 actually.
I hear you. Our IOHK Hydra is not much better.
Yeah. All right. Well, that sounds good. I think unless there's other things to discuss, then we can wrap it up a couple minutes early.
Awesome. Thanks for putting this together, Graham.
Yeah, thanks, Graham.
Thank you very much.
Thank
Can I
you.
say a few quick words?
Thank you. Yeah. Go ahead.
I just want to say that the NixCon is still looking for sponsors. If anyone here is working for a company that wants to sponsor, you can contact me.
Okay, good to know. I will pass that information out, and maybe next office hours we'll start with that. Where should people go to get some information about that?
So you can go to the NixCon, nixcon.org, which will link you to the ticket system and FAQ. And if you have any questions, it's probably best to ask me on IRC or join the NixCon channel and ask publicly there.
Okay, and when is NixCon?
It's in October, in late October in Brno, Czech Republic.
Excellent. All right, I look forward to seeing you there.
You too.
All right, have a good night, everybody. Nice to see you all.
All right. Thank you. Take care.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.